Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Scots Soldiers. Today I'm continuing with my presentations of model soldiers representing the Canadian military. Today it's the Royal Regiment of Canadian Artillery. The RCA is a direct descendant of both the English and French artillery forces which served in Canada dating back to the 1700s. But having said that, the contemporary RCA's history is directly tied to the British Army's Royal Artillery, which served across Canada prior to Confederation in 1871. I want to do a deeper dive and share with you some of my artillery sets, which are related to the RCA from a variety of makers, and the linkage between one of my sets and an historic ceremonial event in the RCA's history. To that end, this episode is dedicated to Scott Dummitt and his Pride of the Nation range, which provided the inspiration for this episode. From October 4th to October 22nd, 2021, members from the Royal Regiment of Canadian Artillery Band, based at Canadian Forces Base Edmonton, and the 1st Regiment Royal Canadian Horse Artillery from Canadian Forces Base Shiloh represented Canada as the Queen's Guard. Their duties also served to honor and commemorate the 150th anniversary of the formation of the Royal Canadian Artillery in 1871. In honor of the Platinum Jubilee year of the late Queen Elizabeth II, on the 13th of May 2022, A Battery, 1st Regiment Royal Canadian Horse Artillery, was granted the title of the Queen's Battery, an honor bestowed upon A Battery by the Queen that will carry on in perpetuity. In memory of this occasion, Canada's preeminent toy soldier maker, Scott Dummitt's Pride of the Nation, created a set of Royal Regiment of Canada artillery figures as they would have appeared as the Queen's Guard. In full disclosure, this set was originally created by Pride of the Nation as a one-off gift for Major Brendan Hogan, a senior of the 2nd Regiment Royal Canadian Horse Artillery, garrisoned at Canadian Forces Base Petawawa. This officer graciously allowed me to approach Scott Dummitt to make a second set for me. To that end, I was also provided photos of the regiment performing its 2021 duties at the Royal Residences. So in that respect, I am indebted to Scott Dummitt and this Royal Canadian Artillery officer, making this set rare and dear to me. Before we get into the toy soldiers, let's look at the photos I was provided of the regiment performing its 2021 duties at the Royal Residences. I will also leave a link in the description paragraph of videos on YouTube of the regiment in England at that time. As I've mentioned before, Pride of the Nation is one of the few toy soldier makers which produced Canadian military sets. This set, which commemorates the regiment's 2021 service as the former Queen's Guard, comes in the standard Pride of the Nation box with the following information. This is Pride of the Nation set number 0077, and it contains 5 figures marching at the slope with an officer. If you're asking, the uniforms are dark blue with red stripe on the pants. Pride of the Nation also did a lone figure in a Britain Sentry box number POTN 0078. I've placed it with a Britain Ceremonial Guard from set number 48517, which coincidentally I bought at Buckingham Palace in 2019. So keeping in line with the topic of this video, I want to share with you my other RCA sets, including this. I received this over 15 years ago. It's made by Mountford Miniatures, and it's labeled the 1887 Canadian Militia Artillery with 9-pounder gun and limber on sleds in a winter setting, number MM403P. Wow, what a mouthful. Anyway, Mountford made some extraordinary castings and sets related to 19th century artillery, and I have several sets yet to be painted and assembled. You can see that these illustrations would have served to inspire Mountford. My one criticism of the set is this. If you've ever been outside in a Canadian winter, you'd be wearing serious gloves. The set figures are just slightly larger than my other sets and is painted in matte. Mountford Miniatures is no longer in operation, and its figures and castings are as rare as hen's teeth, a loss to the hobby for those who like to paint these unique castings. These images of the Royal Canadian Horse Artillery in winter are dating back to the late 19th century and speak to the challenges the Canadian artillery faced in the days of horse-drawn teams pulling artillery across ice and snow. You will notice that the guns and sleds are, I would say, identical to what Mountford and Kingcast created. You can almost hear these artillerymen's uncharitable thoughts about their infantry or cavalry counterparts, warmly ensconced in their Quebec Citadel barracks besides a roaring fireplace and a glass of something cheery and alcoholic in their hands. For whatever reason, the earlier images of the Canadian artillery suggested that it only operated in cold, snowy winter conditions. I don't know if this was to provide shock and awe to the constituents of the British Empire or to highlight the extraordinary operating environment coupled with the uniqueness of the winter sled carriages, marketing them like a 21st century mobile artillery. At the time, these sleds were said to have cost the government of the day the princely sum of $60, and the troops were said to have been pleased with them. I suppose it beats walking in the snow. If you are looking for resource books, here are two that I have. This is a technical book on the 9-pounder, and this other one is a more generic source on the Royal Artillery. These images are Kingcast sets from the late 1980s and predate my Replica/Kingcast set, which you will see later on. These sets belong to another OMSS collector, and I've included them so you can see the variety offered by Kingcast back in the day. But wait, don't despair. If you don't have a set, these, as I said, are now available from Replica Model Soldiers. If you watched episode 68 about Replica Model Soldiers, you would know that the company has acquired a portion of the original Peter Cowan Kingcast molds and can produce this set and others from the original Kingcast line. Episode 71, which I admit was a bit of a cheat, was a glimpse of what I am now showing you. Replica is making a limited edition of 10 of this specific Kingcast Royal Canadian Artillery set. And to ensure their safe delivery to your door, Replica has packaged them in this container metal case with a nice packaging and inserts about this set. And I really think that this is, genius, because When you're buying a set of this size, you really want to make sure it arrives in one piece in mint condition. This set, which is labeled DC5, Royal Canadian Artillery 1890, is a 6-horse team and limber at halt, with the gun deploying, and as I said, it came in the metal case with a certificate of authenticity, a short history of Kingcast, and the use of the 9-pounder in Canada, and also a copy of an original 1889 Royal Artillery sheet on how to unlimber the 9-pounder. The set, which is gloss painted, and the figures are engaged in different actions, dynamic as it were, as they wrestle the 9-pounder in the snow after unlimbering it from the caisson. And while the mounted figures watch and keep the horse team calm and ready, Replica does several versions of this set at different price points, so check out the website to see what appeals to you. Now I want to draw your attention to another set produced by Replica, but is in fact from a nostalgia mold, and it was done for another collector and is labeled Royal Canada Artillery Winter, Marching Order 1890. Now I've spoken about nostalgia and the urban myth that all the molds were destroyed after limited castings. Clearly this is not the case. But get a load of the snowshoes, if that doesn't speak Canadian winter. And to hammer home the point, here are some images from Harper's Weekly dated January 5th, 1889, again showing the hardiness of Canadian artillery troopers exercising in the winter. Here we are again, drowning in stereotypes. This is a Dorset model soldier set I purchased from a fellow OMSS member, and it's called Halifax Garrison Artillery 1885. It came with the figures only, but an artillery piece has since been added. Dorset was likely referencing the 1st Halifax Battalion of Garrison Artillery, and here's an image circa 1861-1868. The Halifax Citadel has had an artillery presence dating back to 1749, and if you've seen my episode 19, you will note the guns mounted to protect both the Citadel and the Halifax Harbor, its naval base, and the surrounding city. If you are ever in Halifax, you must stop at the Citadel, and just below it is the Royal Artillery Park, where you can see historical artillery pieces. Like the previous Dorset set, these are late 19th century, and in a Zoom meeting with some fellow collectors, the consensus was that these were converted from a variety of Britain's figures. The Busby and pants match both the Royal Artillery and Royal Canadian Artillery, but the red coats with the white cross belts is a miss. I was thinking perhaps it was a derivation of the Northwest Mounted Police of the same time period, simply because the Northwest Mounted Police wore red serge jackets, blue pants with the stripe, and as you can see from this photo, some elements of the uniform are a match. But I'm left with maybe the painter took some extra liberties or artistic license, and so the uniform color scheme is a hybrid of sorts. Either way, the guns are well detailed. Armstrong breech-loading 12-pounders with limbers, toolboxes, and a rather uniquely posed set of figures. The Royal Canadian Artillery is not a facet of the military you get to see every day, and like other Canadian military units, it's unfortunate that the general public does not have more exposure to it beyond ceremonial occasions. Like others who serve in our militaries, these are, after all, volunteers, be they family members, neighbors, and other persons we turn to in times of crisis or emergencies at home and abroad. This summer, elements of the Royal Canadian Artillery are far from home, deployed to Latvia in support of the NATO multinational brigade positioned in that country. with respect to the Royal Canadian Artillery, if you are traveling across Manitoba, stop in Shiloh, where the Royal Canadian Artillery Museum is located. I hope you enjoyed my figures and this glimpse into the Royal Canadian Artillery. And if you liked the video, please feel free to hit the like and subscribe buttons to help this channel grow. Until next time, keep collecting.